Zombies! They bite, they scratch, they make me drop my entire life savings to fix a door for the 16th time.
Just like my fourth wife.
That's right, these shambling undead bodies have certainly made their mark on all things entertainment, from video games to TV, and of course, movies. Yet, despite being one of the most prevalent creatures that go bump in the night, personally, I can't say I ever found them all that scary. Sure, the idea of the dead rising to feast upon the living is definitely a scenario I'd rather not find myself waking up in, but when stacked against the greats of horror, like some of those other nightmarish offerings we've received, it can be hard to find dread in we're essentially just arthritic vagrants with a skin disease. And yet, despite the odds being stacked against them, they still remain some of the most popular monsters to slot into your horror franchise. So I want to know, how did zombies first get their start in pop culture? How come I don't personally find them all that frightening? And what are some of the ways that storytellers have gone about reinventing this classic fixture of the genre? So strap on your motorcycle jackets and be sure to double check for any mysterious bites, and let's discuss. Zombies have been crawling out of their graves and onto our screens since about the 1930s, with many attributing Victor Halpern's film White Zombie as the first to establish the modern conventions of these monsters risen from the grave. The 1932 film, starring none other than Dracula himself, Bela Lugosi, put forth many of the characteristics we'd identify with a zombie across pop culture. Moreover, it also draws a lot of inspiration from the Haitian folklore that originally inspired the legend. Though the film itself is one that takes place in Haiti, and yet still pretty much exclusively follows a cast of white characters. But, it was the 1930s, so what do you expect? Lack of cultural sensitivity aside, the film brought into the public consciousness the idea that these ghoulish monstrosities would have a set series of features, including being revived from the grave, being incapable of speech, and pretty much lacking all aspects of their former humanity. Meaning, unlike you, my dear listener, they are completely incapable of liking, commenting, and subscribing to this channel. Though something that makes them different from their contemporaries today is that these undead creatures are more positioned in the realm of mysticism, meaning that instead of just being left to their own devices, they were more so puppeted by this wizard-like necromancer, who is the character that Bela Lugosi plays. And for a while, many films would keep up with this trend, including one that would get a famous TV show named after it, that being The Walking Dead. And these stories would continue to draw from the Haitian folklore of ghouls, keeping the origins of these undead nightmares firmly planted in that of mysticism. But it'd be in the 1960s that a lot of the more modern trends of the zombie would be made into the mainstream by none other than filmmaking legend and de facto father of the zombie feature himself, George A. Romero, with his seminal feature, Night of the Living Dead. You could also argue it's partially the 1964 film Last Man on Earth, but in that movie, those are technically vampires. Either way, it was around this time that the zombie would be cemented as not just being a creature of magic, but actually something of a viral infection, causing the dead to rise and seek to consume the flesh of the living. And Romero would basically make it his career to continue to expand upon the zombie as a concept, divorcing it more and more from the Haitian roots of voodoo and ghouls, to making them more of a commentary on the growing disconnect being created between us and our humanity caused by the society we've built for ourselves. And apparently this worked pretty well because following these projects, zombies started appearing everywhere. From movies to television, video games, especially when home consoles started becoming a thing. And by the modern day, zombies are practically everywhere. We've got them in Call of Duty, Red Dead Redemption, Islands, we've got plants fighting them. Hell, even my college had zombies that you had to shoot with Nerf bullets on the way to class. Before it all became a confusing series of Zoom meetings.
Hold up, Bailey! Are you sleeping?
But the point is that we are well beyond the point in which including these undead brain eaters is some kind of a novelty. It's caused me to reflect on them and really question whether or not I ever found them scary to begin with. And I've distilled down to about 5 points why I don't find zombies all that particularly frightening. Number 1, they're not very strong. Zombies are typically undead corpses, filled with mold, maggots, and all sorts of disgusting bacteria. These things' musculature is about as dense as your average deli meat, and skin as strong as tissue paper, meaning that you can easily rip off pieces from them, or completely knock them over entirely. They're just not that strong of an individual opponent. And it's just hard to find something frightening when you can literally just kick their legs out from under them. Number 2, they're slow. Zombies can travel at the brisk speed of an octogenarian in a retirement home rushing to catch the early bird special. which, I mean, if you're not a bowl of cream of wheat, isn't all that frightening. So outpacing these things is not very difficult. Anytime you find yourself surrounded by these creatures, so long as your endurance is greater than that of the average member of Congress, then you're probably gonna be fine. And if not, then number 3, they're easy to avoid. Zombies don't have all that much of a skill in terms of mobility. That's already been established. But not only can they not move forward and back with that much diligence, they can't really travel up and down either. Some have demonstrated the ability to climb stairs or even ladders, but I've never seen one of these guys actually manage to jump. Or at least the vast majority fail to achieve this level of athleticism. Climbing up a ledge or even a tree is more than sufficient to get you out of their grasp, leaving these slack-jawed menaces in the dust. And even in those instances where you are contending with zombies who can run, they'll mostly just do so by pursuing you in a straight line, taking whatever is the path of least resistance. And because in the end, they don't have the hunting ability of, say, a wolf or a bear, but are more something like a Venus flytrap. So long as you can stay out of sight, you're gonna be out of mind for them. Which isn't too hard because, number 4, they're dumb as rocks. Yeah, unlike a lot of classic monsters in horror cinema, you know, like vampires, werewolves, demons, ghosts, and aliens, zombies just don't have that much going on upstairs. When one of these other creatures is hunting you down, you know there's more tactical planning going on, and even subterfuge and misdirects.
What do you mean they cut the power? How could they cut the power, man? They're animals.
Yeah, a lot of them are stronger than us, but when it comes to these things, it's not only just a battle of strength, but also that of wits. Vampires will seduce and control their prey, werewolves can track and hunt you down, aliens can do a whole number of things to you, and ghosts and demons take it personally, locking on their opponent and making their life a living hell until finally taking that final blow. There's a level of intimacy that goes on with these other creatures that is just not shared with their undead counterparts. Zombies don't hold grudges, they don't have deep plans, they don't think about the long term, and if you do somehow manage to escape, then they're probably not going to hunt you down. They're more or less just indifferent to whether or not they succeed or fail at their goal, meaning if one fresh bag of meat manages to slip away, they're content with just waiting for another to cross their path. They're not one for one-upping their opponents in terms of intelligence, instead just try to bum rush you. And if that doesn't work, they're more than happy to put their bodies on the line if they think it will get them within an inch of your grasp. They'll throw themselves into saw blades, propellers, anything in their way is little more than an afterthought, meaning it's super simple to lure most of these guys into a trap. And finally, number 5, they're easy to dispatch. How many times have you seen them just get mowed down one after the other, doing nothing to avoid their incoming demise? Their lack of survival instincts and critical thinking make them little more than bowling pins, just waiting to get knocked down by whatever machinations their opponents have conjured up. So yeah, to recap, they're not strong, they're not fast, they're not great hunters, they're not smart, and they're not durable. So why are people afraid of them again? I mean, I guess superficially it's kinda creepy, you know, seeing a rotting corpse in front of you shambling about. We as people are designed to find dead bodies off-putting, mostly because evolutionarily speaking, they signal as a warning sign that there's something around that could hurt us. That and also just filled with diseases and bacteria, so it wasn't sanitary to be around them either. And often their skin is rotting off, and you know, that's kinda gross in like a body horror way. But I mean, you're not just afraid of things like the Xenomorph or Nosferatu because they look creepy, right? No, it's how they pursue and act when you're around them that really send a shiver down your spine. And in terms of how they act, I mean, zombies are just kinda goofy. Moaning and falling over themselves. Even in the movies that they're in where they're supposed to be taken seriously, plenty of characters just don't. And treat them like the rotting bags of flesh that they kinda just are. Which, more often than not, does lead to them underestimating their opponent and then causing them to get swarmed, which is when a zombie is at its most dangerous. Individually, one-on-one, they're not too much of a problem, but it's their numbers and ability to be underestimated that does usually result in a lot of people meeting an early demise when around them. But I think the real horror that surrounds the zombie isn't so much the creature itself, but more so what it does to people. And I don't just mean how it's coming to rip our limbs off or eat our brains or something like that. Plenty of animals in the wild will inflict similar harm to a person, but we've still turned them into stuffed animals and hell, even domesticated a number of them and making them our friends. So it's not so much the threat that they pose, but more how they change how we interact with one another. Because a zombie itself isn't scary, but a zombie virus, well, that's a whole level of fear that results in all kinds of unravelings of the social fabric. Because we as people, much like zombies, are not so dangerous one-on-one. Sure, some of us might train to be menaces to society, But an individual person, much like a zombie, can only do so much. It's when we're in groups are we at our strongest, which is what something like a zombie virus seeks to dismantle. Because as we all know, something as simple as an invisible microorganism can create a massive amount of panic and hysteria amongst a body of people. Not knowing whether or not someone's infected, and the fear that that can lead to a greater amount of death, that's actually something psychologically damaging. And this is more implemented in the recent trend of zombie movies. Following George Romero, seeing zombies be less of a magical threat, and more something any one of us could become, given the right circumstances. In fact, in George Romero's stories, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and even things like The Walking Dead, the show, not the movie, both of which George Romero had nothing to do with, every single person on Earth was already infected with the virus.
Like AIDS or something?
Meaning that you didn't just simply need to be bitten, but instead, all you simply needed to do was die in a manner where your body was relatively intact. And then, no matter what, you would come back as a decrepit husk of your former self. Which meant that no matter where you tried to hide, these things would inevitably get to you, if by nothing else than just entropy. And in cases where you do need to be bitten in order to transform, well, that creates a whole nother level of fear, where you have to be meticulous as to who has and has not encountered the monsters. And not knowing whether or not you could already be contaminating the rest of your friend group, just by being around them, is in itself terrifying. It's the civilizational breakdown of the very structures and systems that we hope would protect us that something like a viral outbreak will cause to crumble. And I mean, hell, there are movies that do this story without even ever including a single zombie at all. Just look at the movie Contagion, which follows a similar story to that of a zombie epidemic, but instead of people coming back from the dead, they just fall down and stay there. In a horrifying realization that the walls that we've erected to protect ourselves do very little against a threat such as this. And I mean, you all know this already because we kind of already lived through it. And to be honest, never really recovered. So the fact that the mass graves that we are filling are also coming back to eat our flesh is merely just an additional problem to what is already a terrible situation. So it's really the social implications that zombies have that make them more terrifying than any sort of brain-eating violence. It's why Romero's shift to changing them from being more of a mystical phenomenon that can only occur under specific circumstances to a global crisis was such a brilliant decision. And not only was he able to utilize it to criticize our ability to manage a pandemic, but he also addressed things like capitalism, the threat of consumerism, and the slow-moving march to death that we all kind of participate in by centering our lives in such frivolous things like shopping centers and the acquisition of trivial trinkets. I mean, hell, in his seminal film Dawn of the Dead, they even say that the zombies revert down to their primitive instincts, their most basic functions, which for these people is not being around their family or participating in any sort of community events. No, instead they all gather around one epicenter of consumerism, where they continue to consume, I guess, but not products. It's a depressing reflection of humanity that zombies create, which is why they can still function as a psychological threat, more so than just a physical one. Because again, zombies themselves aren't that scary. They're not that smart, they're not that strong, and they only have so many ways of hurting you. But the fact that they act as a reflection of ourselves, in fact, quite literally when you see people that you know being zombified, it creates a depressing image on where we might be heading as a collective. Eventually being hollowed out and populating these monuments dedicated to corporations that function just the same, whether we're people or mindless ghouls. And all of this is done by just simply bringing back people from the dead and throwing them into the familiar situations they found themselves within during their day-to-day lives. So to wrap things up, I do think that zombies themselves are just not really frightening creatures. From the ease at which it is to dispatch them, from the complete oversaturation they've seen in our pop culture, to the point of parody. In fact, many a time signaling the last gasp of creativity, exiting a franchise. But when a creator actually does understand what about them makes them such a frightening foe to begin with, that is, I think, when they're at their best and most interesting. It's the reflection they cast back on our society, and how, at the end of the day, we may not be so much different from them. But hey, if that's all a little bit too depressing for you, then there are still plenty of zombie stories that got you covered. Just whatever you do, keep them out of my Metal Gear franchise. God, I can't believe that was the last one of those things. Hey, thanks for watching, and if you stuck all the way to the end, why don't you check out another one of our videos on screen now. And if you want to chat directly, come join our Discord, link in the description below.